He told all the people that they had to donate their titles to their houses if they wanted to stay a member of the church, which also meant if they wanted to keep their wives and kids. So basically, most of the people in Short Creek donated their titles to their houses to this charitable trust called the UEP. So he had most of the titles in Short Creek. When he ran from the law, he was the sole owner on the charitable trust, and the state took it from him.
Good.
And gave it to ex-FLDS people who started managing it and giving titles back to people. In my case, it either would go back to the person who built it when they were not going to give it to Warren Jeffs, or a wife of the person who built it. So that's where I came into play. It's like a 45-bedroom house, over 50 bathrooms, I think. They have some in the public bathrooms. Yeah, almost all the rooms have bathrooms. It's a mansion.
I just love so much that you're the one that got it.
I know.
It was Warren Jeffs, and it's like a final F you to Warren and be like, and I got your house. Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you want to see our faces and anything we may put up on the screen, go to my YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can like and subscribe, become a supporter, an advocate for these guests who are bravely coming on and sharing their stories, leaving those words of encouragement, because the guests do read the comments, and it really means a lot to all of us. So today's guest, we just did an episode with her, and you may have seen it previously. If you haven't, don't worry, you can continue watching this one. We'll leave out any context that is missing, but if you want some further context of her life, you can go back and listen to the first part. So in the first episode, we talk about how she was part of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Fundamentalist Mormonism, where they still practice polygamy. It is the breakoff sect that was or is still led by Warren Jeffs, who is currently in prison. You may have seen the documentary Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey. She's actually from the documentary Prisoner of the Prophet, because she was his 65th wife, the 65th wife of Warren Jeffs himself. So in the first episode, we talk about what that was like, how she was essentially a prisoner held captive in multiple places. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how she escaped, how she acclimated to the world outside of the community, and how she founded or co-founded the Dream Center in Short Creek to help other victims or survivors, people who are coming out of these groups and need help. So, all of that to say, thank you so much for joining us again, Briell Decker.
Hi.
Hey, welcome back.
Hi
Welcome back. We knew we had a lot to talk about with you, which is why we wanted to give your story justice and give it the time and the space that it needed to recount all of these details. And I have to thank you again for going into so much detail and recounting these really difficult, traumatic stories that you did in the first episode. We're going to do a little bit of that in this episode, but mostly this is about the healing, the journey afterwards, and how you're doing now. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. We left off at the escape, right before this.
Yeah, I guess I'll give a little bit of context as to what's going on here. So you basically have been denying the prophet Warren Jeffs. You're like, I don't want anything to do with you. He was very upset with that. He sent you to multiple places, including South Dakota, for years, where they were threatening to blood atone you, which, for those who aren't familiar, it is a Mormon practice that happened way back in the founding days, and shockingly is still happening now in more discreet ways, where if someone refuses to repent for something, they can righteously, this person, slit the other person's throat, spill their blood on the ground. That guarantees they go to heaven. It's really backwards and messed up. It's basically murder. In your case, Briell, they were threatening to do this to you because you were non-compliant, even though you were telling them, I didn't do anything wrong. So at this point, you have been watching your back. You have been in survival mode. You finally get transferred back to Short Creek. And this is where most of the compound is, right? Like the founding area of the FLDS. And Warren Jeffs is currently in prison, but is still running the group, and you are forced to go to your brother's home, and you are now locked in a room in solitary confinement. So you are at your brother's house now, and what are the living conditions that you are being forced to endure at this point?
The day that I got locked up in solitary confinement. I actually tried to run away once that morning. I got found on the road. Some FLDS people saw me running and turned me in, brought me back.
Oh.
And then they locked me in solitary confinement. My brother was actually told to lock me in solitary confinement by the bishop or somebody. I don't really know who it was, somebody above him. And I believe he was being threatened. I don't really know for sure, but I think he was being threatened also, and his children that lived at the house, his wife. So the day that I escaped, I was only locked in solitary confinement for one day. And by the time I got back to the house, he had my father come over. He had one of my sisters came by. They said basically goodbye, which I thought was weird. My father said everything's going to be okay, which I knew he didn't believe. He didn't really know what was going on himself. He just knew that I was being locked up. So my brother had put 2 screws in the window, so that it was the kind of window that lifts up. And so he put 2 screws there so that it would hit the screws and wouldn't go all the way up. They turned the doorknob around so I couldn't unlock it. Like the unlock piece was on the outside, so in the hallway. And I had to have a key to unlock it on my side. When this happened, they told me to lay down and read. And it was broad daylight by this time because I already tried running away earlier that day. And so what I did is I waited till I heard the truck leave that my brother drove. So when he drove off, I was like, I'm going to try to find something to unscrew these screws. So I knew if I started that process before he left, he would just come in and put screws all up the window so that I wouldn't be able to escape. So I waited till I heard his truck leave. Then I found some scissors and I started trying to unscrew the screws, and one side came out really easy. The other side was halfway screwed in and it was really tight. So I just found some tools in the room, like anything that there was, like shoes or glue bottles or just anything that was like had some weight to it, and I would pound on it. Well, my sister-in-law, she walked around and looked in the house and kind of gave me the look like, what are you doing? She was on the outside of the room. And she came in and called somebody. I could hear her talking on the phone. I just kept pounding on things. She opened up the door and she took all the tools I was using, and I just kept on finding more stuff because I had a whole room full of stuff. She locked the door again behind her, and after about probably a half hour, then I broke off the screw. I heard her gasp in the house. It was like a trailer, so I could hear her. But I don't think she knew that I had already gotten a screw undone. So in my mind, I'm thinking if I open any drawers, she's going to know that I'm leaving. But if I just climb out the window, she might think I laid down after I got one screw undone. So I climbed out the window, and nowadays they say that she didn't notice for 2 hours that I had left. And I took back roads this time, went through the creek. I was running to a specific house that I knew the whole family had left the church together. I had to know where I was running to because I didn't want to show up in an FLDS house. The FLDS were still running the city at this time frame. I ran through a yard right before I got to the house I was running to, and there was a lady in her backyard meditating, and she was dressed ex-FLDS. And she said, "Can I help you? Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm trying to get to the house next door," because I was really close to where I was running to. And she drove me up there, and she said, "Should I go in or should I just sit out in the car?" And I said, "You might as well go in." So she came in with me, and the family I ran to had left the church really recent, and they knew there was small organizations like I did that were helping people, but we didn't know how to get a hold of them. But the lady who came in with me did know their phone number. So she called the organization that was called Hope Organization at that time. I don't think that one's around anymore. The family I ran to wanted to keep me. They were like, "We'll just take care of you." But I had seen standoffs with some other people that were once Rulin's wives. So like I knew it wouldn't be a good situation. Even if I stayed, I couldn't stay in the town. There would be a standoff, and it would be bad because the police officers were still FLDS too.
Oh my gosh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah. So I just kept telling them I need to leave. It's not going to turn out good. So they finally were convinced by like the end of the day, and they drove me down to Hurricane, which is like a neighboring town, and met up with an activist. And that was the first day we met. she picked me up, and I was still dressed in my FLDS clothes, and so was the family that brought me. They were all dressed in FLDS clothes. So when she tells the story, she's like, we thought we were being set up.
Yeah.
But then I climbed in, and then she realized, oh, this is real, you know, and we drive away, and she took me to her house in New Harmony, and I stayed with her that night. The next morning, the police officers went through the town with a picture of me, asking everybody if they had seen me. They tracked it down to the Hope organization. The Hope organization called my mom, and she told them that I was okay. That she just told the police officers I'm okay. So the police officers took that as that was a good thing, and they walked away. But then one police officer came back and said, that's not good enough. We need to talk to her directly. The Hope organization felt threatened, and they gave my mom's number to that police officer. Well, she wasn't my mom at that time, but now she is.
Oh, your adopted mom.
Yeah, this is my adopted mom, who fought for me really hard when she first met me. We had never met each other. She said she had an overwhelming feeling that I was one of her kids. And it's interesting because, like, you think about, like, her siblings. She told her children all their childhood that they would have another sister. And then it just, when it happened, she didn't even register. They came to her and told her, like, this is our other sister.
That's so sweet.
I know. So anyway, they gave the number to the police officer, her number, and the police officer called her and told her that he had to talk to me directly. And she said, you're out of line. I'm going to call your supervisor. And she called his supervisor, and he was fired that day.
Wow.
Because he was out of line. He should have listened and gone with all the other police officers. Which is a really, really hard thing to point out because, you know, like most police officers, when they come with all this authority and stuff, like, you usually believe them. My mom was like, this sounds fishy. So she just checked it out and found out that he was out of line.
Yeah.
It wasn't an FLDS police officer. I think it was a guy from St. George that actually came back. So it was a supervisor in St. George that fired him for doing that. So then there was a whole piece in my story where I got scared because I was afraid of my mom's house being tracked because they had her phone number now. So I went to a shelter in Salt Lake, and I met with some other organizations up there that were small also. There was only small ones at that time that were helping in this field, which was better than 10 years ago. You hear stories of people that left 10 years ago. Their children were all sent with them. They just moved from rental to rental because they had like 13 children. And the rentals, they had to lie on the contracts to even get a roof over their head. And then they'd get kicked out in the end because they have 13 kids. And it was just a never-ending cycle because there was no resources. So at the time when I escaped, there was more resources, but they were just small, barely startups. So I went and met with another organization in Salt Lake because I was up there. And I usually live in like southern Utah. So like in Salt Lake is more northern. And then one day the organization that I met with up there called me and said, we need you to sign some paperwork so we can get your ID. I didn't even know what ID was. I didn't realize I needed it because I never really registered that I used it in the past. But they're like, we need you to sign some paperwork. And then they showed up with my ID. And I said, how did you get this? And they said, we went to your parents. And it triggered me so bad that I ended up in the hospital over that.
Oh, no.
I demanded to go to a specific shelter, had more security. And they didn't really want me because my abusers might know where I am. I had so many abusers that they didn't really want me. And also because I needed intimate partner abuse, and their funding was only for not polygamy, like just married couples. And so they said no at first, and then the activists convinced them that they already had a plane ticket that was going to fly out in 1 week. So I could be discharged from the hospital, go to this shelter. I had high security, and in 1 week I would be sent to a lady who was going to take me in Minnesota. They already had an airplane ticket to go to a lady in Minnesota. I went to the shelter, and then while I was at the hospital, actually, my biological mother called me. So this is a month after I escaped. I get this phone call that says I care, and she didn't have my alias to actually talk to me, but they put a note up that said this person called, and she said she cares. And it kind of scared me because I'm like, how did my mother know where I am in Salt Lake, a month after I leave? It's just weird. So I went to the shelter and I called the lady in Minnesota, And she was like, oh, call me back in 5 minutes. And then I'd call her back in 5 minutes and she would never answer. So I went to my case manager at the shelter, because most shelters, like domestic violence shelters, have case managers that help you sort out as much as they can your situation. And I said, this is what's happening. And she said, try it. So I called her. She said, call me back in 5 minutes. I called her back in 5 minutes and she didn't answer. So she said, there's something wrong. We're going to switch up this whole plan. And she called another domestic violence shelter in Utah and got me in there. She drove me to the shelter. But she drove me the day after I was supposed to fly out. So we had a plan in place and it was going to take place on Monday. And it was Friday when we got the plan in place. So I was supposed to fly out on Sunday. And so Monday morning, then the organizations that were helping me showed up at the shelter and asked to talk to me. We decided together, the case manager and I decided together to go see what they wanted, because we hadn't been telling them about our plan of what we were going to do. We just didn't fly out. And so that's why they showed up. So we went down there and they're like, where are you going? We know you didn't fly out. We told them we were going to a homeless shelter. And they're like, okay, well, we know you're mad at us for going back and getting your ID from your parents. We just want you to know that your parents are here in Salt Lake. And we were like, oh, okay. So we went out of there, and then she drove me to the other domestic violence shelter, because the domestic violence shelters have security, where like homeless shelters, they put you out during the day to go sort your life out on your own. Well, like 2 days later, we get a call from the old shelter telling us, don't be out on the bus routes, don't do anything like that, because your family showed up here, demanded you, and said they've been hunting the roads for you. They went to the homeless shelters and they never saw you come out.
Oh, jeez.
And there was another girl who was kidnapped off the street at the same time. And my mother had been calling all the shelters, my biological mother, telling them, all the activists at that time, telling them if they knew where I was to please give me back, because she had custody of me. I was 26 years old. But she was claiming that my health was so bad that she actually had guardianship over me. And my adoptive mom, who wasn't my mom at that time, but she was an activist, she told her, you need to show me the paperwork. And she didn't have any paperwork on it. So she couldn't actually show her that. And so she just quit calling her. So my mom figured out that I was 26 and I had my own rights. So I had a chance of escape. When I went to the new shelter, we actually didn't tell all the activists that helped me in the past, because we didn't know if they were all linked together or not. There was 3 of them. And then we picked up 3 new ones. One of those ones helped me get to Tennessee in a family. They actually secreted my ID in the airport. They drove me to Colorado so I wouldn't be intercepted at the airport. Secreted my ID. I stayed away from Tennessee so that I would be safe. I get to Tennessee, and the family that took me in was really, really nice, but they weren't prepared for, that's when I actually realized I had freedom in my life, was I was at their house. I felt safe. I was like, oh my goodness, I could go to college. I can go to the doctor. I could do so much stuff.
Yeah.
And I started having ins and outs of mental stuff, because my medicine, I had dropped cold turkey. I was on 800 Seroquel, super detrimental. It's actually lethal by the time I left, I had 800 Seroquel. So if you drop it cold turkey, it's a pretty big deal. Anyway, I started having these psychosis, and the family I went to didn't know what to do. They didn't want to take me to the hospital because I was hiding. They didn't know exactly what to do. So I ended up going to a domestic violence shelter anyway, just for support, because they had so many cases, they wouldn't focus on me directly. And this domestic violence shelter that I went to was a shelter that had, the children's room was right outside of my room, and it had a doorway in between where the children would walk in, one of the doors that was empty, one of the rooms next to me, and they'd climb over the divider and ask me if I got food that day. So the children have different dynamics than adults. I didn't have as much psychosis with children, so I would get food that day. They would bring me food.
Oh, wow.
And so that was super helpful for my healing process. They asked me several times if I wanted to go to the hospital, but I was they said they wouldn't save my bed for me. And I was like, well, this is the same thing, might as well stay here. It took me about 6 months to have constant clarity in my life, where I could just function And I did get help by the end of that. I think I did figure out that I did apply for like food stamps. I think I applied in Tennessee. I've applied for SSI, therapy, different things, resources with my old name before I got it all sorted out. I did find an attorney in this time frame. I also went and did my GED. I went to school every day. Even if I was in psychosis, I would just go to school, and they helped me a lot. I had people who would sit down with me and basically be my therapist, but they weren't actually therapists. My school teachers would sit down and talk to me for hours. They'd take me aside and talk to me.
Do you want to talk about that at all? What the experience was like going to school after you had only done the homeschooling program through the FLDS?
Yeah, no matter how high you go in the FLDS, you have to do GED. Even if you graduate 12th grade, then you have to do GED because it's not recognized by the state, by any state. So it was hard for me. I did go for I was in Tennessee for 2 years. I think I graduated right before. I didn't even actually go to the graduation because I passed the test right before I left. So I went whenever I could for 2 years. I didn't have it much to do, just staying at a shelter. I remember the first time I rode a bus, I actually called the shelter and said, "Which side of the street do I get on to go back home?" And they had to figure it out on the Google Maps and stuff. There was a lot of things. When I stayed at the house in Tennessee, they brought me to a restaurant for the first time, and they were asking me what I wanted to eat. And I'm like, this is kind of turning my phone on Chinese and telling me to turn it back. I don't understand the language. I don't know what's here. I've never been here. I don't know how to choose for myself.
Because restaurants were not allowed when Warren came into power, right?
Yeah. So choice at all was a huge, hard thing for me. Just looking through this whole menu with so many choices was way too hard. Even the activists nowadays will say they usually just give them 2 choices because they want this or this, because it helps them not take hours on deciding what to eat right after they leave. I was told by several activists that I could go into the store and buy any clothes I wanted, and I didn't know what size I was. I didn't know how to select, so I'd wear all these baggy clothes.
Well, because you had made your own dresses up until this point, right? Or they were all homemade, at least.
Yeah. So I'd choose really baggy things, and it's really hard to get into style at all and figure out what I actually wanted to wear. And during this process, then my mom she was one of the organizations that we dropped, and she was crying every day, hunting for me. One of the organizations that was helping me at the time recommended I call her back, and I trusted them by this time because I had never had any complications with this one. So there was 3 organizations we dropped in the past and picked up 3 new ones, and those 3 new ones kept the confidentiality. My mom was part of the 3 old ones, so I did end up picking up the phone one day and just calling her, and she answered every time I called her from that day on. She's so good and especially in the beginning, it was really important because it's part of my triggers. If they hung up on me, or then I figured they didn't like me. So she really helped me through my trauma by answering the phone and talking to me whenever I needed. Probably about 6 months later, I decided I wanted to choose a last name, and I wanted a last name of somebody. I didn't want to choose a last name. So I asked her to adopt me, and she asked my dad, and they both agreed to adopt me. So that was about 6 months after that we actually went through with all the paperwork. But we found an attorney after I asked them to adopt me. So we changed my name to Briell Decker legally. And then we weren't planning on doing the legal adoption, but when they changed my social, then they either had to do a legal adoption or you have to testify against your abuser. So we did do the legal adoption, and it was easy because we already had their last name.
Yeah.
And so what it did for me is all the records of my past and health. So if you have a lot of stuff on your record, they won't actually change your social criminal record. I didn't have anything. So it was easy to change that. But the hospital records also clear.
Oh, okay.
So that was the biggest thing for why they did the adoption with me. Wasn't only because legally it needed to be happen, but I wanted to do it because when you go into the hospital for too long, then usually everybody in America, if they're there for longer than they can, way too long, if they're on a coma or something, then decisions default to your family to make decisions for you. And so for me, I had PTSD, so I would be like disassociation kind of, where I'd be out of it in the hospital for time at times. Like it took 6 months before I had constant clarity, but it also took about every 6 months after that I'd have a PTSD episode for a while. So for about 3 times. If I was in the hospital too long with a PTSD episode, then the decisions, like I had a risk factor that I would end up in the FLDS because they would default to my biological family.
Yeah.
So we did the paperwork so that it would default to my adoptive family. We just did the social change.
Mm-hmm.
It would never register that my biological parents, who they were, or anything. And so, like, if you think of like the story of Britney Spears, where like she had a similar mental health case, but she went through court to fight it. Where I didn't go through court, I just kind of jumped the gun and went straight and changed my social. So I immediately had a whole new set of people in my life.
Oh, that must have been such a huge relief after all of this running that you had been doing.
Yeah, because I got safety immediately. I didn't have to worry about court decisions changing and any of that. I just had a new social, a new family, and it just immediately set my life on a safety trail.
So once they adopted you, did you end up moving in with them?
No. I lived in Tennessee for a while until like when they changed my social, they didn't change my SSI in the same month, and I was on SSI for a little while there. I'm not anymore, but I was on SSI because of my PTSD, because they didn't change it in the same month. They were still going to, but I couldn't pay my rent that month. So I had a lot of friends in Tennessee, but I called my attorney who helped me he was a Utah attorney, Roger Hool. He helped me change my social. And I asked him if they could speed up the process in any way to be able to pay my rent that month. He said, it's really interesting because I just had an ex-FLDS man who left the church. He became a pilot. He went to college, became a pilot, and he just walked in my office and he handed me some crisis tickets, airplane tickets. And he said, if anybody is in crisis, tell them that Short Creek is changing from FLDS to ex-FLDS. And tell them to fly home. So I got a hold of my mom. We talked. We found some friends of hers that lived in Salt Lake. And I did fly back. And they paid the bills until I got my Social Security income. And it back paid. So like I paid my rent anyway. But I just moved to Salt Lake. I took like medical billing and coding college for like a year. I missed the test by like 16. I should have tried more, but I didn't really. And then during that process, I found out about the Warren Jeffs house and how the UEP works. So the UEP is the landowners in Short Creek. And basically they were set up by Warren Jeffs when he was running the cult in Short Creek. It wasn't actually him who set it up, but it was taken over by Warren Jeffs kind of when he became the prophet. It was set up by the cult though. And when Warren Jeffs became the leader, this is the fast version. There's tons of different versions. But he told all the people that they had to donate their titles to their houses if they wanted to stay a member of the church, which also meant if they wanted to keep their wives and kids. So basically, most of the people in Short Creek donated their titles to their houses to this charitable trust called the UEP. The ones who didn't were apostates at that point, where there were people they were ex-FLDS who left the church. So he had most of the titles in Short Creek. And then when he ran from the law, he was the sole owner on the charitable trust, and the state took it from him.
Good.
And gave it to ex-FLDS people who started managing it and giving titles back to people who built the houses. And in my case, Warren Jeffs was the owner of this house. He wasn't actually the one who built it, but that they would consider him in the UEP as either would go back to the person who built it when they were not going to give it to Warren Jeffs, or a wife of the person who built it. So that's where I came into play.
Yeah.
I went and applied with a business plan, and we actually wrote on the business plan that we wanted to temporarily call it the Dream House. And a year later is when we met the organization called the Dream Center, which I had never heard of.
Oh my gosh. So that was just a coincidence?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I have so many of those in my story. That's why I still believe in God, though. Even though it's not the same God. It's not like my elder brother or anything like that. It's like an all-powerful superior being.
Yeah.
I believe in that because and I don't really focus on works. I still want to be a good person and stuff, just like anybody would want to be. But like, I don't like people telling me how to make it to heaven.
I don't blame you.
Anyway, so when I applied for the house in February of 2016, then it was June of that year that I met my husband, and I met him through my adoptive brother. My brother worked with him in Salt Lake and introduced us, and we started dating. And that was a really big learning curve for me. It still is to some degree. I remember there's this one experience where I told him I have a class that was booked in Salt Lake. He had moved down with me in my father's house, and I was telling him I have this class that I booked a while ago, and it's just coming up. It's a week long, and I'm going to go to it. So I went to it, and I come back, and he's like, don't ever do that again. I was like, why? I'm used to 6 months with Warren Jeffs. Like, I wouldn't even hear from Warren Jeffs sometimes for 6 months.
Yeah.
He's like, a week is too long. There was a lot of things. Our honeymoon was like to go see the ocean for the first time. I had never seen the ocean, so we went to Santa Monica.
Nice. Over in my area.
Yeah. We couldn't travel without permission in the FLDS, and they discouraged it, and they didn't tell you how fun it was. They didn't tell you anything about how learning new cultures, that whole experience can be so beautiful. They just put fear in everybody about doing that, and it's just not that way. It's actually really fun to travel. So we have traveled quite a bit now. We've gone to like Puerto Rico, we've gone to Cancun, Mexico City, Hawaii. We've done some really fun trips, and just this year I figured out that I've been to 26 states.
Oh, wow.
Outside of what the religion took me to. And also, I don't count airports either.
You got to come to Costa Rica with us.
Yeah, it'd be fun. But I am, like right now, I'm trying to slow down on travel for reasons that are personal. Like I have some things in the works that we're hoping will pan out this next year.
Okay.
Children. So I can't really go into it, but we're trying to not travel.
Okay.
Keep my health more intact, but we can do interviews like this over Zoom, and also like the Dream Center's here. So I was telling you, it was a year later that the Dream Center came on board. So I met my husband in June. So we applied in February, met my husband in June, married him the next year, June. And 3 days later, we met with the UEP and the Dream Center. I was awarded the house in November. So I applied in February, met my husband in June, awarded the house in November. The next June, I married my husband. 3 days later, we met with the Dream Center, UEP, and me. And in the next October, so it was October of 2017, that we had all the contracts finalized and signed them. So I basically gave away everything I could give to the Dream Center to build a recovery center here.
Yeah.
And the Dream Center did do that. Like at first, it was October of 2017. So this FLDS was still running the Hilldale City. And they were hoping that it would be taken over by ex-FLDS. So basically, the UEP had been taken over by ex-FLDS. Mm-hmm. So that's how I could apply. Even though I wasn't a legal wife, they were ex-FLDS that were running it, so they knew that I was once married to Warren Jeffs. And so they honored that. They awarded me the house in that November. The next year, the Dream Center came on board. October, we signed. That November was election year. And it did get taken over by ex-FLDS that year in 2017. So that was a huge deal because they did a lease to own first to make sure they could get their licensing in this area. And it was the first building business to get their licensing after Warren Jeffs was gone. It was a huge experiment to see if they could even succeed here. They have now been, so I did like 3 years of salary and I was a fundraiser. So I did a lot of fundraising. But after 3 years of that, then I started hourly on site because they did get their licensing and they did get their title. During that process, about a year and a half into the lease to own, then we got our house in Colorado City. So my husband and I were told when we did the business plan, when I first applied in February, and during that process, they told us, we decided that the house is too big for you, but if the business plan works, then you can, if it works or if it doesn't work, we're going to give you a small house. And then it worked. So we held them to that, and we got a small house a year and a half after the Dream Center came on board. So we have our own house. It's a fix-up. I started after the lease to own, after the salary ended. The lease to own ended, after the contracts ended. Then I started working on site here, and now I have been working on site for over 3 years, and I work full-time now. At first it wasn't full-time. I've had like 3 raises. It's been a really fun journey just to be able to work with people all the time. They specialize in single moms breaking the cycle. They do like single dads too, and they do take in families also. It's like a 45-bedroom house, over 50 bathrooms, I think. Because they have some in the public bathrooms. Yeah, almost all the rooms have bathrooms. It's a mansion. They've put sprinklers in. They've remodeled a ton. They have an adopt a room program where they can basically, people go in and adopt the room and paint it and buy all the furniture for it, and then they get a plaque on the outside of the room that says who did it for like publicity. They also have bought more buildings in town. So like the next door neighbors, somebody got it from the UEP, sold it to somebody, and then they sold it to the Dream Center. So the Dream Center bought a building next door that has 15 rooms that they call the Mission House. And basically it's mission crews from all over the world, or anybody that has a crew of people that want to come into town. They can book a trip, and we have leaders in town that will like schedule their whole schedule out to like weed people's yards, paint people's houses.
Wow.
And they can even go on like their own tourist things if they want while they're here. So because we have like Zion's National Park an hour away.
Yeah.
On one side, on the other side is Grand Canyon, an hour away.
I'm just still reeling at the fact that this is a 45-bedroom house. I can't even pick. You have to send me photos of this so we can put it on the screen. I can't even picture what that would look like. And I just love so much that you're the one that got it.
I know.
It was Warren Jeffs, and it's like a final F you to Warren and be like, and I got your house. It's so great. And I'm going to use it to help people get out of this monstrosity that you created. It's just brilliant.
And also it did factor into it. Like people will say, how did you get awarded out of all the wives? Well, for one thing, I was one of the first ones to escape. I was like the second one. So the first one did sit in the audience and support me in getting it. Some of his children got out during the process, but they didn't want it. They never came forward to ask me for anything. I think part of that was because they had traumatic experiences here more than I did, but I don't know that for sure. I just had sad ones. I didn't really have bad ones. So I've had a lot more good memories in Short Creek Dream Center now than I ever had anything else, because I've been here like 6.5 years or something. Well, 7 years counting the year when I applied. But they've been here for about 6.5 years, the Dream Center.
What is it like then, living in Short Creek, having that history there? I know you just said you had good memories there, and that's awesome. I imagine it might be hard sometimes, though, especially if you run into people who you know who are still in the FLDS, or you're not allowed to talk to them. Is it difficult living there?
In Short Creek, it's pretty difficult. Because everybody has different layers of trauma. So like some people stop at this level and they're like, we're not gonna ever bash polygamy, or some people stop at this level or this level. There's so many levels of healing. Like some people think that there's actually organizations that say children should go back in the environment they're used to. And for me, I'm like, I don't really agree with that. I think that children should, if they want to leave their family, that's one thing. But if they want to leave their culture, that should also be an option for them.
Yeah.
They shouldn't just automatically be decided they should go into another polygamy group.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fair to them. That's kind of like putting somebody through trauma, clear until they're 18 years old. Like, why would we do that? That doesn't make really a lot of sense to me. Now, maybe they'd get a good family or a good situation later, but like it's still trying to force them to identify with a situation that may not be good for them.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I call polygamy Stockholm syndrome, where there's two sides to it. There's the captive by the system, and there's also people who identify with it now because it's gone on so long. I can't say it's all bad, but I do think that people definitely identify with it. But why would you make somebody go through that? I don't know. It's just hard for me. I think the parents should weigh in on that, of course, but because if it's their children, they definitely should weigh in on that. But I think there should be options so they don't have to put them right back into another polygamy group.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the Dream Center does, is they don't do that. They won't put them straight back into polygamy group. They kind of are more Christian based. They're more public about being Christian based, but inside the building here, we don't get to talk about God because of it's a trigger. It's like walking in a rape recovery center and saying we're going to talk about rape today. So they've made a specialized program, even though they fundraise as Christians. They have a specialized program that's more sensitive to the situation inside of the building. They have church as an option. And also in Utah, it's really crucial if you understand the fundraising side of it, because like my mom had an organization she created after the Hope organization left called Sound Choices Coalition. For a long time, she had that one, but she couldn't raise enough donations to do a whole lot. You have to have a ton of donations. So the main ways of getting donations are usually grants or like a Christian background. So if you're in Utah, which the Dream Center is in Hilldale, Utah, which is Short Creek. Short Creek is basically encompassing Colorado City and Hilldale. It's what it was called before they were actual cities. But it's in Hilldale, Utah. So if you were to get grants, you have to really filter through them. I'm not saying they never get grants, but you have to really filter through them, that they're not like, because it's a Mormon, culture here, that they're not something that you can't help the people with. You don't want so many restrictions that you can't actually get to what the people need. So to have the Christian background, we already knew worked in Utah. That wasn't really the experiment with this organization. Because there's another small organization that's now bigger. It's called Holding Out Help. It's in Salt Lake area, and they are Christian based. So they already showed us that Christian based is a good platform to help people. We just wanted it in Southern Utah too. So the experiment with this particular building was the change of energy. And the Christians have that also. They have in their Bible that says what was intended for evil, God will use for good. So it was like a perfect combination to create this here.
Yeah.
And it was so needed. It was so needed. Like that's what broke me out of my shell to go talk publicly, was just the need. I cared so much, and I knew so much about how hard the pain was for me and for others to some degree, that it was just overwhelming to not try. I had to try. I just wanted to not only tell my story, but I just wanted to, help people. I just wanted to fundraise. I wanted to do whatever it took to have this organization here. And it's just been such a huge blessing. And every step of the way as we get along, it's just, you think about like in the past when the police officers would observe, they would come into town and they leave. Having an organization right in this hub, even though it's now mostly ex-FLDS in Short Creek in Colorado City because of the UEP being taken over, and then also the cities being taken over. It's always going to be a hub for information, I think. Sorry, my tongue has been damaged by the medication, so you probably can see that a lot in how I talk.
No, you're doing great. I haven't even noticed.
Yeah, I talk fast too. I'm trying to learn how to talk really clear and slower. But anyway, so the Short Creek Dream Center, they're in this town. This town is like a hub still, and it probably always will be for information. But the FLDS are actually scattered in more places, and they also are still practicing a lot of things. They estimate about 5,000 have left the church, and about 5,000 are still in. So they're actually still practicing in other areas, but I like to focus on my story, which is mostly the healing process, because I've been out like almost 12 years. In May, it will be 12 years. And I think it's crucial, like I explained to you, to have like the understanding of how the healing process is also like so important. Like I don't want to be drowned in like the negativity and that it's still going on and all of that. I mean, it's important to know, but it's not actually the only piece, like there's a whole piece about healing and transformation and what it entails. For me, it's been like a whole lot more layers, because I not only had to heal myself, like I wanted to help people. So I've, gone way out there to help people and understand what actually needed. Yeah.
First of all, what an asset having you helping these people, because you can clearly identify things that are going on. You know the nuances of the religion. You know how to approach these people. It's amazing that you're willing to put yourself in that position. And on the flip side of that, I imagine it can also create some triggers happening for you. I mean, I experience some of the same thing doing what I do here. Every now and then I'll be triggered with my own trauma while talking to somebody else, and it's not always an easy thing to do. So how have you been able to manage that, or do you feel like you have a good handle on your mental state?
So my health, I've actually been out of the hospital for 6 years. So I've been out of the church for about 12 years. I think helping people does most overall. It helps me too. So I do get triggered at times, but I have a lot of therapy. I have a lot of coping strategies. I have a lot of support, but I have my own support system. I don't expect everybody to be a part of my support system. So there's some coping strategies that are really helpful in my healing process. Talking helps me. Just having those close people around me really helps me. I don't expect everyone to be a part of my support system. A lot of people have wanted to be a part of my support system that I haven't really put in there, because it's like an investment. Every relationship is an investment. And if I already have, a few people, I don't really want everybody. I do know enough to know that I want some people, because of how bad my trauma got and how I was afraid at the end, before I escaped, that I was going to be committed, to a long-term psych unit by a judge who doesn't know me, and my whole family's against me because they're all following Warren Jeffs, and the doctors are following Warren Jeffs, and the judge isn't going to know to believe me. So in that kind of situation, you don't want nobody on your side. You kind of want a support system. You need some people that will testify for you and stand up for you, say that you make sense and that kind of stuff. But as far as everybody, I don't think that's necessary, and it's too much investment anyway. You can't keep up with everybody, even if you tried to. I always think about presidents and stuff, and how in activism they teach us to narrow down our focus until we can handle it. So in my activism, I don't actually focus on cults. I actually focus on, which I don't think is a bad thing, I just focus more on generational abuse. Healing from generational abuse is my angle. And I think that's narrow enough but broad enough where I can talk about multiple things, but it's still narrowed down. But you think about all these presidents that get attacked every day, and I'm just that is so probably never ending trauma, because they can't possibly do everything. It's we told all our whole lives to narrow it down to where we can handle it, and then we just expect one guy to do it all, which is weird. He needs a team up there. I don't know. I'm just that's impossible. So why are we putting so much pressure on anybody up there?
It is a lot for anybody, and we know that it takes time, and we know that there are coping mechanisms and strategies and things that you can do to heal. So I'm wondering if you have any of those that you'd like to share with people who may be going through something similar.
My first one is definitely the support system. You do need a few people on your side. You don't need everyone. That's a coping strategy. Another one is if you're going into disassociation, one of the most common ones is taste, the 5 senses: taste, smell, touch. Do something, or have somebody that, my husband will a lot of times make sure I'm present, just so that he knows that I'm not going into that. Because actually when you go into disassociation, your brain actually shifts. And if you can bring it back to the front, that's the 5 senses, and make sure you're communicating and all of that. So those are basic ones. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole bunch of coping strategies. I think talking helps me. Like I said, that's a coping strategy for me. I have a list. My therapist gave me a whole list of different things. Music sometimes helps people. It does help me if I have the right kind of music. I need positive music. I'm more I have like one therapist told me like there's a triangle. It's like a triangle, and it's like there's the hero, the victim, and the perpetrator, and it rotates. So like if I'm a hero, I always like the hero complex. I like to like talk about like being positive all the time, but it actually rotates. So like if I'm telling my story, if I'm talking about the perpetrator, he's going to think I'm the perpetrator. You see what I'm saying? So like no matter how you look at it, you're one of those pieces in somebody's story.
Oh, interesting.
And you're never going to be like the hero every time. You're not going to be the victim every time, even if you want to be. It rotates. I like psychology a lot. I have tried, I enrolled in psychology and then I dropped out one time. And it's just because I'm too busy. I have too much on my plate, and I do a lot of public speaking. I figured out that's more of my calling. I'm a peer support specialist, which is I have lived experience. They say I have like a PhD in lived experience. So I have like a perspective of helping people by what I've been through, which is a lot. So I have contrast. So such a big gap. Like they actually call it post-traumatic growth, where you see things completely differently. And it's actually a term in psychology. Is there's post-traumatic stress is when you're going through the negative part of it. Post-traumatic growth is when you see things differently because of it. And it's good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And you're married, as you mentioned, and you still believe in God. You have a higher power of faith in that. And is there anything else that's like a big part of your consciousness story? Anything that brings you peace and happiness?
There is stuff like, we work on our house all the time, and the baby stuff I can't really talk about, but like we are working pretty hard on having our own kids and stuff. So
That's
we'll see
exciting.
how that goes. That is the biggest trigger I think I would have if I had children. I don't know if I would stay in this town, and it's not because of, it's just, I think I'd be really triggered if my children were bullied because of me. That would be really hard on me. I think bullying is a common thing all over the world, but if it came from me, my past, I don't know if I could handle it. Like if I went some other place, they might be bullied, but it wouldn't be because they know me, most likely.
Even just having that awareness is amazing, that you're able to project into the future and understand the full scope of what your child may go through. Yeah, and be willing to completely relocate so your child has a different experience. To me, just speaks to how amazing of a mother you would be if that does happen for you, and I hope that it does.
Yeah, I hope so too. But yeah, we have lots of pieces. But as far as like me living in this town, I think if we don't have children, I think I could handle it. I could handle, a lot of stuff. So it would just be that piece that might take me away at some point.
Yeah.
So right now, because we're not traveling so much, last year when the documentary hit in January, then we traveled every month for an entire year. And now we are settling down, and we decided we can still talk to the people that come to town, or we can do like these Zoom interviews. But as far as like people touring the Dream Center stuff, they're trying to slow down on that too and focus more on helping the people, and because they've had so many cameras, and also traveling. So there's two things that are slowing down, and there's two things that will continue.
What are some of the ways that people can support the Dream Center or support you?
So on the shortcreekdreamcenter.org website, they have a wish list. They also have like those admission crews I talked about, the Adopt a Room program. They have like a donate button. There's a lot of ways you can actually help. They have like, they take donations for clothing, for, different things all the time. So
okay,
you don't only have to donate clothing. I mean, money. You don't have
yeah.
There's not one thing you can, if you have something that's extra, they probably can use it.
Yeah.
Or somebody in the community will. They'll find somebody who will. But
I've had a lot of people comment, and I haven't known where to send them really, but a lot of people have said, how can I become one of those safe houses for people like yourself who need a place to stay? Do they offer anything like that?
I think Holding Out Help more, because this is like a crisis house. Holding Out Help is the organization that does more of that. They do collect all that information. They call them host homes. and they do use them a lot. So
Okay.
yeah, I would direct them to holding out help. Yeah.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in this recovery episode, in the redemption episode?
I can't think of anything. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I know that I wanted this opportunity so bad because there's so many pieces it feels like. And I know as I tell it more, it gets more clear what I actually need to say. Because I need to listen to the audience. I need to hear their comments and stuff to be able to critique myself and how to tell this part of the story anyway.
Okay, great. So. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to come on and do not 1 but 2 episodes with us. So guys, if you haven't seen the first episode, you can go back and watch that for some more context as to what Brielle went through before she escaped. And this has been so great. I'm going to list your social media. So brielledecker.com is her website. She mentioned already, but shortcreekdreamcenter.org is where you can find out more about what they're doing in the Dream Center. Her Instagram is at Brielle Decker and Facebook, Brielle Decker Blanchard. We'll put everything in the description below. We'll also add the Holding Out Help resource as well. And, we need our Linda Listen moment. So we have to do another one. Do you have another sassy statement or words of encouragement?
Another sassy statement?
Yeah.
I think what we use to survive may not be what we use to thrive. And that's the scriptures I had, all those tools I used in the church to get more opportunities and stuff, I don't use anymore. I have to revamp my whole life to be able to thrive out here. And letting go of those things is part of it.
What a great piece of advice. I've never considered that, but that's such a good point because sometimes we hold on to the things that got us from A to B, not realizing that we need different tools to get from B to C, for example. So, yeah, that's really great advice. I love that. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
I think that's good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so happy that you were able to come on and share with us. So, guys, if you're listening, leave those words of encouragement down below for Brielle. Check out the Dream Center. Any way that you could support is amazing. If you want to support the podcast, liking and sharing and commenting is huge. It helps the algorithm boost it out to more people so that more people can see this interview. And if you want to support even further, we do have some merch at cultstoconsciousness.com under the merch tab. You can come to Costa Rica with us if you want to hang out and do something a lot less culty. That's in the description. You can become a patron if you'd like at patreon.com/cultstoconsciousness. Our newest patrons, Jane, Jill, and Meg, thank you so much for your support. And if you like this video, I will link 2 more down below that you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.